So it's 2 o'clock in the morning, y'all. I just got back from a family gathering. I am tired, baby, but I got to get this video out for y'all. So come on, let's dance, because I got to get my energy up. Girl, the way you moving got me in a trance. DJ, turn me up. Ladies, this your dance. Girl, drop it to the floor. I love the way your booty goes.
What's up, Scandalites and Says So Squad? This is Ashley with Ashley Says So, and I am back with another Old Hollywood Scandals video. And before we get started, do not forget to go to ashleysaysso.net to get your merch. And also, if you want to send me gifts, the Amazon wish list is in the description. Today, we are going to talk about the beautiful singer and sometimes actress Pat Rainey, who made a huge splash and then suddenly disappeared. Let's get to it.
I'm not sure what's true or false in this video. I take gossip and tea and scandal from online, from books, from magazine, from word of mouth, and I ball it all up and I tell you guys a story. The whole video is for entertainment purposes. I have done my research. Make sure you do yours. Now, let's get to the video.
Patricia Teresa Rainey, aka Pat Rainey, was born on April the 27th, 1925 in Boston, Massachusetts. Her mother's name was Dorothy Esther Ackerman, and her father's name was Julian David Rainey. And the Raineys were well-to-do people. As a matter of fact, Patricia's father, Julian, was the highest paid black man in public service in all of New England. And because of the family's wealth, I am more than sure that Patricia, who was the couple's only child, had a glorious childhood. Of course, her parents doted on their little princess and showered her with gifts and praise, and they were more than delighted with little Patricia's beauty as well. It was more than likely a perfect childhood without blemish until Pat, which is what I'm going to start calling her now, until Pat was around 7 years old, because that is when tragedy struck. Her mother, Dorothy, passed away suddenly, leaving Pat and her father to mourn the early loss. Now, Julian, who is still a very young man, found himself at a loss of how to raise his daughter alone, so it wasn't long before he was scrambling to find another woman to mother Patricia. And he found this woman in a lady named Gwendolyn Peterson, who he married only a year after Dorothy's death. Now, it is not known how this quick marriage of Pat's father to her stepmother affected her, but if it did indeed bother her, Pat had no time to talk about it, because Julian did what most wealthy fathers did at that time when an unwelcome circumstance happens. He sent Pat to a boarding school. We actually just did a video not too long ago about Barbara Hutton, and her wealthy father sent her away to a boarding school after her mother passed. And just like Barbara Hutton had a hard time at her boarding school, Pat Rainey also had a hard time at her boarding school. You see, Pat's boarding school was created specifically for wealthy black girls who were part of the bourgeoisie, you know, the upper echelon. And these boarding schools basically taught these young black girls how to be wealthy housewives. They were expected to use this teaching to marry well. Well, Patricia found out that although she had been regarded as pretty her whole life, she wasn't quite pretty enough for the station that she had been born into. And if you find that absolutely amazing, you are not alone. This was news to Patricia as well. However, she was quickly told that her looks could be corrected. All she needed to do was have lighter skin. In fact, to prepare her to be a successful, wealthy housewife, they were going to lighten her skin for her. And baby, the folks say that every day or every night, them ladies or teachers or whatever you want to call them would take little Patricia and rub her whole body down with smelly, painful bleaching cream. Now, of course, this was a terrible hot behind mess, and gossip claims that later on in life, Patricia would complain of this treatment. She actually said that this right here was the start of her suffering with identity issues and self-esteem issues. And we can only guess, but possibly this event right here, along with her father remarrying so fast, might have been the reason that when Patricia, or Pat, became a teenager, she started down a path that certainly didn't match what her father had in mind. Rumor has it that Patricia started to recognize that she was a magnificent beauty, but that she could use her beauty for a lot more than just becoming a wealthy housewife. She decided instead that she wanted to entertain, maybe she wanted to dance, maybe she wanted to act. But it was when she started to sing to herself that she recognized that she had a pretty good voice. Now, it wasn't a voice like Ella Fitzgerald or anything like that, but she had a pretty decent voice. And so Patricia knew with her great looks, paired with the decent voice that she had, she could certainly knock down the door that she was standing at. and that door was show business. Now, a lot of people have said that her father was absolutely appalled at this decision. He was a high society lawyer and politician, and his daughter was looking to be an entertainer. Being an entertainer back at that time was not really classified as a respectable career choice. Also, the strides that Julian had made himself had made it to where his daughter shouldn't have to work. All she would have to do was sit back and get married to a man of her station. But regardless of what her daddy Julian wanted, he could holler, he could shout, Patricia did not care. She was set on going into show business. So it's the mid-1940s, and Pat is around 19 to 20 years old, and she starts going to local clubs and trying to sing. But rumor has it, nobody really took her seriously locally because she was known as a wealthy society girl. Everybody knew her father. So, they just didn't take her career choice seriously. So Pat decided very quickly if she really wanted to chase her dream as well as prove everybody wrong, she would need to move to the Big Apple, New York. So in 1947, she took off for New York, and as soon as she got there, she auditioned and performed at Cafe Zanzibar. And Cafe Zanzibar was the best thing smoking, honey. It was actually touted as the new and improved Cotton Club. And here at Cafe Zanzibar, the audience could be black and white, not just white like they did at the Cotton Club. So Pat went to the cafe or the club and was said to have auditioned to be a singer at first, but gossip claims that the owners were not impressed, so instead they gave her the position of a showgirl. And you would think that this would have been a slap in the face, but this really was not a low blow for Pat. Because yes, it was a job as a showgirl, but this was a New York showgirl. And she was performing at the Zanzibar, a club that had a lot of famous faces. Cab Calloway, who was a Zanzibar favorite, Bill Bailey, heck, even Pearl Bailey, although Pearl Bailey probably wouldn't have helped old girl out, But anyways, just a lot of famous faces who she would probably be able to make connections with. And honey, Pat must have worked those connections thoroughly, because the same year she arrived in New York, she caught the eye of Louis Jordan, and he did not hesitate to put her in one of his movies. This movie in particular was called Reet, Petite, and Gone. And really, if you watch it, Pat was a little bit out of place because homegirl wasn't even supposed to be in the movie. But Louis thought that she was so beautiful and had so much talent that when he was told that there were no lines for Pat to even say, he basically had the producers of the movie work in a part where he would be kind of singing at a recording studio and Pat would just be standing beside him, just kind of dancing, jigging, and singing a little bit. So that's how much he wanted to showcase her. And of course, many people didn't think and don't think that Louis Jordan just kind of put Pat in his movie, just to showcase her beauty. They felt that Pat had to do something strange to get a part in that thing. And maybe she did, but with all these years that have passed, there is no way to confirm or deny that. Now, whether Pat was smashing folks to get work or not, she was moving up the ranks pretty doggone quickly because of that good exposure that she had with Louis Jordan. In 1948, she started singing with singer Dean Earl at an exclusive nightclub named Eddie. So just that quickly from 1947 to 1948, Pat had moved up from a showgirl to a singer. In fact, she started singing at a place called the Finn Gate, with her singing being broadcast over radio. And then in late 1948, early 1949, she ended up recording her first record called Gotta Love You Till I Die. And I don't know if Pat knew that this song was going to blow up like it did, but it truly blew up. I mean, almost immediately, it was known as the hottest record of the year. Heck, it was even reviewed and called favorable by Billboard. So your girl was making strides as a real legit singer. And since Pat was getting so much radio play, heck, her bookings and her gigs, oh baby, they were everywhere. She was all over. But Pat's music was not the only thing that had people yapping and talking about her. Oh no, honey. The folks say late 1948, early 1949, she was also dating famous boxer Joe Louis. So baby, you couldn't tell Pat nothing, honey. She had her singing career. She had her big famous man on her arm. She was a rising star and she was living a star's life. But notice I said that she was a rising star living a star's life. Because see, Pat made the mistake of believing, since she was living a star's life, that she was already a made star. She basically thought her foot was further in the door than it really was. She didn't understand that one hit record or a year or two of gigs and performances off of that one hit record does not solidify you as a true star. Definitely not a true star with staying power. But because she was living that celebrity and star life, she made the mistake of getting too deeply involved with the party life that celebrities lead. And as soon as she really got too involved with the party life, her foundation became shaky. Let me explain. First off, her relationship with Joe Louis went absolutely nowhere. Turns out she was the newest, prettiest girl on the scene. You know what I'm saying? Back at that time, Joe Louis was kind of running through him. Y'all remember he had Carol Drake, Lena Horne, Ruby Dallas, a whole bunch of them that we'll talk about when we get to his video. My point is, like I said, he was running through pretty women. So Pat was kind of just the latest. But Pat barely even noticed this breakup, because there were so many wealthy men buying her gifts, inviting her out to dinner. So she just left Joe and went on to the next available guy. And she would find a lot of these guys at these celebrity parties. Well, of course, at these wild celebrity parties, just like today, drugs floated around everywhere. And Pat was young and she was living, so baby, she felt like she could dabble in all of this too. But this was the second thing that went wrong and made her foundation shaky. That dabbling turned into an addiction. And it was bad that she was addicted, but Pat felt like she could manage it because the type of drugs that she had become addicted to, she could just go to the doctor and feign some type of illness and get them to prescribe that same medicine to her. So that wasn't that huge of a deal yet. But the third thing that happened that would make all of this stuff become a huge problem is that the popularity of her one song started to die down. The radio had played the song out. People were tired of hearing it. And now with the fanfare of the song going down, Pat's bookings, gigs, shows, whatever you want to call it, started slowing up as well. So soon Pat found herself swirling down the showbiz drain, and not only that, she was running out of funds. Well, she was running out of showbiz fun. You see, there was one thing that Pat knew she could depend on, and that was her look. And she also knew that she could use those looks to replace her lacking showbiz fun. So gossip claims that Pat started accepting dates from wealthy men and basically letting them take care of her. But ain't no man, well, I mean, there may be a few, but majority of men are not just going to be taking care of you just to date you. They're going to be expecting you to put out some good TT by the end of the night. And so that is what Pat started doing. And very quickly, this process right here turned into full-blown prostitution. Now, some of you might be thinking like, dang, if she was just going to start prostituting and using her stuff anyway, why didn't she go the casting couch route to help her career? Well, rumor has it, the reason that Pat didn't go this casting couch route was because a lot of those men that could so-called help her out with her career were also finding trouble with their career. I mean, this was a new decade. This was the 1940s turning into the 1950s. A lot of those men, Louis Jordan, let's take that for instance, because she was rumored to have messed around with him. Let's take him for instance. His career started slowing down, and people like him, their career started slowing down. Their type of music, jazz, big bands, cool pop, things like that, was starting to be very old-fashioned. Now we were in the 1950s, so this was the time of rock and roll and smooth R&B. So again, a lot of these men probably couldn't help Pat if they wanted to. Now, whether all of that is true or not, the fact of the matter was, with no new prospects when it came to Pat's career, she basically went from rising star singer to drug-addled, high-paid escort, and that was within 2 years. And you know how I told you when Pat first became addicted to drugs, she kind of was able to hide it, and it kind of wasn't that bad because she would get her prescriptions from doctors. Well, 2 years in, those doctors were now starting to get smart. You only got so many illnesses you can fake and so many doctors you can see asking for that type of medication before they understand that you're using this to get high. So doctors stopped prescribing it, and Pat got desperate, and this was the very first time she got in trouble with the law, because Pat forged a prescription and tried to get it filled, and she got caught. Now, she was arrested, but she denied the charges. And looking at Pat, it was easy for the police as well as the judge to believe her side when she said that this whole thing just wasn't true. She made a mistake. It was easy to believe her saying that. She did not look like the woman that would get caught up in this type of thing. Also, when they found out what her background was, she was a woman of such wealth and such high pedigree, she wouldn't be caught up in any mess like this and commit a crime like this. It must be a mistake. So they ended up letting her go. And to go further into the details about Pat's looks, that was the thing. Even though she had fallen by the wayside career-wise and was definitely alleged to be on drugs as well as prostituting, she didn't look like it. She was still just as gorgeous as ever, still very put together, wearing these beautiful gowns and beautiful furs. In fact, whenever I think of this situation in Pat Rainey, I imagine Sunshine from Harlem Nights, the prostitute that Layla Rashawn played. Remember how beautiful, sweet, and innocent she looked? That's kind of how Pat Rainey was. In fact, that's how classy and good looking that she was the night she went to a nightclub and met a white guy by the name of George Roach. Now, from what I can find, it looks like they made introductions and he got her phone number, and later on that night, he called her for a date. Pat and George Roach did meet up that night and they went to a hotel room. And from there, you got two stories. The first story says that George came up to that hotel room and hit that thing, and after he was done hitting that thing, Pat told his behind to pay up, and that's when he informed her that he was a police officer. And he also told her that she was under arrest. And if this version is true, George know he wrong, baby. Because why come you wait till you get the good honey pot and then sit up there telling some I'm a police officer? Baby, you know you wrong. Now, the second version says that George actually didn't hit that thing, but he did come up to visit, and he basically got Pat to admit that she was selling her services. And that's when he informed her that he was a police officer and she was under arrest. Whichever version is true, not only did George have Pat arrested for prostitution, he also put in his report that he found a hypodermic needle in her room. And so he also had her arrested for heroin possession. And that basically confirms clearly that Pat was getting a prescription for opioids, and now that she couldn't get that prescription anymore, she had to go down to street heroin. So once Pat was arrested, baby, news traveled far and wide about this wealthy socialite who was trying to break into the music industry or once was a rising star, now arrested for prostitution and heroin possession. Child, it was in everybody's newspapers. It also was published in Jet magazine. People were absolutely shocked that a girl, a wealthy socialite, would grow up and take this path. But none were alleged to be more shocked than Pat's father, Julian. It's alleged that he was actually enraged because he was embarrassed. And now he didn't understand more than ever why she hadn't just chose the role of a wealthy housewife instead of doing all of this. Now look what she's mixed up in. And oh, the details of it. Prostitution and heroin? And I'm not sure if the judge that presided over this trial is the same judge that had let her go at an earlier date for that phony prescription. But it seems like it could have been because this judge seemed like he had a vendetta against Pat. And the reason I say that is because he made her sit in jail a whole month before this case went to trial. Like, she got arrested on November the 7th, 1952, but didn't go to trial until December the 17th, 1952. And the folks say that when the trial date approached, Pat actually pleaded guilty, and her daddy, who came through for his baby in the end, pulled major strings behind the scenes, and she ended up with a suspended sentence, and the judge paroled her into her father's care. Now, if Pat's father, Julian, thought Pat was going to have a different outlook on life because of what just happened, baby, he thought very wrong. Because in actuality, as soon as Pat got free of her legal situation, she went right back into the showbiz life. She wanted her singing career to work. But the wonderful thing about it is that this time, Julian decided not to fight against what his daughter wanted and instead to help her out. He also wanted to keep a watchful eye over his daughter. He did not like what happened to her the first time. So gossip claims that he became her manager. And that was the best choice that could have been made, because Julian used his major influence to get Pat booked at the exclusive Storyville Club. And this was a very high-end club with very wealthy and notable patrons. And Julian not only got his daughter booked there, he pegged this show as Pat's comeback show. He spared no expense on the marketing and the promotion, and this show was a monster of a success. Pat came to the stage looking lovely. Her image was now of a 25-year-old smoking hot, torch singer. Her voice sounded very crisp and clear. It was truly a night to remember, and her father ensured that her performance at the Storyville Club would be talked about far and wide. Every black newspaper, possibly some white newspapers as well, and definitely several black magazines. In fact, her comeback performance was even featured in a 1953 issue of Jet magazine, the same magazine that just had featured her being locked up a couple of months before. Now here they were doing an about face singing Pat's praises, and this is what her father wanted. He wanted those same people who read about his daughter's downfall to now read about her triumph, to know how great her comeback show was, so they would be eager to see this for themselves. And this plan worked spectacularly. Over the next 6 months, Pat became more popular than she had ever been. I mean, performing all over the United States in the best and most exclusive clubs. And baby, by 1955, Homegirl was a full-blown star. Oh, she had performed at the Ringside Club over in Paris. Matter of fact, stayed there 9 months to perform because they couldn't get enough of her. Did dates in London, did dates in Scandinavia. And it was while she was traveling the world and entertaining that she ended up performing at the famous Kit Kat Club in Rome. And it was here that she caught the eye of a king, baby. King Farouk of Egypt, to be exact. Now, I would love to give you all the spicy details of this affair and break it down for you. But from what Pat said, it was after a performance that the king sent word that he would like to take her out on dates. But Pat said after he asked her that she told him that right now she would just settle for a couple of drinks. You know, she wanted to get to know a little bit more about him and his culture and everything else before they actually started dating. Allegedly, though, whatever Pat found out, she must have liked, because she was said to have caroused with King Farouk a few times. But their affair really didn't last more than a couple of months. Now, even though Pat was at the top of her game the second time around and had even made it to what we call celeb status, I honestly truly feel that the way her fame and fortune kind of dropped from her that first time around, the way it kind of just was yanked from her, I think that created kind of a phobia for her. Like, she was always so nervous that it would happen again that she would always try to beat it before it happened. Like, basically, she wanted to leave the business on her own terms before the rug was yanked from under her. And I say this because during Pat's years of high fame, she would sporadically just kind of disappear and drop away from the spotlight. Like, if she felt her gigs were slowing down or her popularity was slowing down in any way, she would just quickly take a break and just be gone. And then she would kind of pop back in out of nowhere. And most of the time she would see that her fame was still pretty high and that she shouldn't have left. Like, one example of her disappearing was like the whole year of 1956. And then in like mid 1957, I believe, she popped back out and just started performing everywhere like, you know, nothing had happened. I actually think she took a small break between 1958 and 1959 as well. But I do know whenever she popped back up from her very last break, she took another break in 1961. And this break right here was a little bit different because now there really was a slowdown in interest in Pat Rainey, because just like 1940s had turned into the 1950s, well, now the 1950s had turned into the 1960s. And so now the style of music that Pat had become famous for and that she was singing, these torch singer type things, you know, they had dropped out of fashion. Now groups like the Supremes were up and coming and about to be all the rage. So 1961 was the last that anybody heard or saw from Pat Rainey when it came to the music industry. And this was fine because celebrities leave the industry all the time to go and live regular, normal lives. But what was weird about Pat is that not only did she drop away from the music industry or the celebrity world, gossip claims that she kind of disappeared in the normal world as well. Said a lot of people that were in regular contact with Pat didn't know where the heck her tail had went. Some of them even assumed and were scared that she had went somewhere and passed away. And it wasn't until 1981 when a Boston newspaper tracked her down and basically informed the world that she was now working as a social worker. But check me out, y'all. This is where things get kind kind of strange. So this newspaper says Pat was working as a social worker in 1981, right? But here goes somebody that left a comment in a YouTube video, and they said in the late 1970s, Pat was actually employed alongside them as a housekeeper for a wealthy retired lawyer. And I understand that she can make a jump from a housekeeper to a social worker. Like, you know what I'm saying? I get it. Anybody can make a career change. But the strange part to me is why a woman that was born into a very wealthy family with a very wealthy, successful lawyer and politician for a father was now in her 50s working as a housekeeper. Like, do you think that maybe her and her father had one final big argument and he cut her off from the family money? Or do you think her father lost the family's money in the end? Or do you think this was Pat's choice and she kind of just disappeared on her own and chose to work as a housekeeper because she wanted a very normal and average life? Or we have the very last option. Do you think the person that actually left the comment was just sitting up there lying? I mean, no shade to the commenter. I don't know if you're on this video or not, but I'm just asking my audience a question. But you know, what are y'all's opinions on this? And really, that's if you guys can form an opinion, because there's really not a lot of meat there. You know what I'm saying? I know we went over a little bit of alleged history between Pat and her father. It's kind of hard to say what happened in those 20 years from 1961 to 1981. But just, you know, what do y'all think? Anyway, whatever you guys think, there was absolutely no more information that I could find on Pat Rainey after the year of 1981 when it was reported she was working as a social worker. The only thing I can really say is that she lived for 17 more years, and then she passed away in Westboro, Massachusetts on April the 13th, 1998. And I know that ending feels kind of empty, but like I always say, if there's nothing there that I can find, then there just ain't nothing there. I can't say nothing. I also always say that on a lot of these situations, a lot of you guys know much more than me. So if you do know much more than me, if you can tell me more about this story, also if you can tell me the facts or the not so factual information on this story, please leave it in the comments. I would love to know. But as you guys type away, let me say that this is the end of the old Hollywood scandal for Miss Pat Rainey. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I will see you guys again soon, and I love you so much. Bye.